I'm Greg Giuliano. I'm an executive coach, organizational change consultant, and author. I believe leaders have the power to shape the future and change people's lives. I also believe people who challenge the status quo and go beyond usual and ordinary are rare. They're willing to go to the edge and push farther, over and over again. When I find these ultra leaders, I love to talk with them. In each episode, I talk with ultra leaders to learn how they do what they do and how they keep growing as leaders. I promise you a full dose of ultra leadership from other ultra leaders just like you in every conversation. We're at the edge of another episode. Let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of Ultra Leadership. My guest today is Dvir Shapira. Dvir is Chief Product Officer at Venn. He's an experienced product management leader with a track record of scaling products from inception to market success. He has seen accelerated growth in previous roles at Incapsula and Imperva, where he built the world's first cloud web application firewall and managed to quickly grow that business from zero to hundreds of millions of dollars in 10 years. He and his teams deliver growth by driving transformational thinking and behaviors, reshaping corporate strategy, and focusing on evolving customer needs in the cloud era. They've created value in ways that have been noticed and recognized by both Gartner and Forrester for 6 years in a row. He earned his undergraduate degrees in physics and electrical engineering and also his MBA, so he's a really smart guy, at Tel Aviv University, and he and his wife and 3 kids live in Northern California. I'm thrilled to have him here today. Welcome, Dvir.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
I'm really glad to have you. And as we were talking earlier, I wanted to follow up. We were talking about how as a chief product officer and working in product management, you have to do a lot of influencing across the organization and get people to buy in and say yes and work with your team. So there's a lot of influencing without authority. People don't work to you, to work for you. And that's really pure leadership. So tell me a little bit about your experience doing that, and we can get into what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you.
Thanks for the intro, Greg. I usually tell my product managers that I see product managers almost like CEOs of their own products. And as CEOs, they have accountability and responsibility for everything that goes wrong and right, but they don't necessarily have the authority over people that they have to get to do stuff for the product to be successful, and as opposed to a CEO. So it's a little bit like a handicapped CEO. And that's really tough. And to be honest, I've been selecting my teams, when I'm hiring, I give more weight to these soft skills, soft leadership skills than the hard technical skills that maybe other people are paying more attention to. Just because of what you just said, Greg, where in order for your product and your business to be successful, you have to get a lot of people you've got to orchestrate basically a group of people from different functions, different parts of the organization to work together towards a goal, but you're not directly managing these people. And they might have conflicting agendas coming in from different directions, from their direct managers, from other parts of the organization. And just being able to influence people and kind of make sure that everybody's working towards the same goal is one of the hardest skills for product managers. And I think that was, for me, it was the best school and how I developed my leadership skills as an individual contributor, as a product manager in past roles. And honestly, Greg, one of the I had a product manager once. He was a junior product manager, and he was very frustrated that the engineering team or the sales team were not doing exactly what the process would have them do. And I was trying to explain to him that they're not software, they're people, and they have their own personal agendas and needs. And you have to be able to manage people to get your stuff done. And, that's sort of, for many of my product managers, that's the hardest skill I need to develop with them
Yeah,
together.
so let's dig into that a little bit because a lot of our listeners are younger leaders. They're in their first leadership role. They've got a team that's their very first time leading a team. And let's say that's me, and you've hired me because I've got some of those real people skills, but I'm kind of still raw a little bit. So, and you tell me, yeah, Greg, you need to get, it's about managing people. People aren't software, right? They're people. So, what are the one or two things? I'm sitting in your office or we're sitting on a call like this, and I'd say, I need two suggestions for what I might do to get better at engaging people to enroll them. What would you advise me?
So I think, a lot of what I learned in my career is that people tend to go and immediately to sort of a transactional kind of relationship. So you would see, I come from a tech background. So, you would see something like a client comes up with some kind of a request. They give a call to their sales representative. They might be angry. The sales representative is apologizes, and then he turns around and talks to the support guy or to the product person, and he's now representing the customer. He's angry, and now the product guy or the support guy turns around and talks to the engineering guy, and they're angry and they're representing the customer, and then vice versa, right? It goes back from the engineer to the product or support person to the salesperson. This chain is only as strong as its weakest link, right? As any chain would be. And I find that this is not a good way to conduct business or to lead people. And I've always worked with my teams to kind of change this dynamic and try and turn it to more of a collaborative engagement where, we are all partners in the same game where our goal is to make our customers successful and our organization successful, and the customer is part of this partnership. So in some of these cases, what I managed to do with my teams is to put everyone in the same room: customer, sales representative, product guy, engineering guy. Everybody's in the same room. Everybody's trying to figure out what's the best way to solve the customer's problem while having all of the other constraints that the organization has. And when you expose your customer to some of these challenges, they understand. They are, in many cases, in the same situations with their customers. So you would find, you would be surprised how open they are to kind of understanding our side of the equation and trying to find a solution together. So this is just one example of how you turn transactional relationships into more of a partnership. And, it sounds good on paper or here at the podcast, but it takes a lot of work, and it takes kind of a change of mindset for organizations that has to be driven by both top leadership and people on the ground at the same time. I've seen that being done very successfully, and I've seen that being done very poorly at certain organizations.
Yeah, I love that. Right. So that it seems like a simple from to, right? From engaging transactionally to really being more relationship based and let's be more intentionally collaborative. It's easy to say it here, but it's a mindset shift for the individual who's trying to gather people and facilitate those conversations. And then there's different muscles that you have to work. That's a different skill set.
Right.
So how do you help those leaders who join your teams to develop those skills?
So first of all, it has to be supported by the leadership. I mean, it can't be an initiative coming from, one part of the organization. I've seen that fail over and over. I mean, you have to have a leadership that is wants to go through this kind of transformation. And I can give you an example. I had a CEO at Imperva, Chris Heinen. Before that, he was at Intuit, which is an organization that I think fosters this kind of behaviors. And he brought it into the organization. He faced a lot of friction with people who were not used to this kind of thinking. But he managed to change the organization, to transform the organization. But it has to come from leadership. It can't come from. I tried implementing some of these at organizations where my leadership was not supportive. It's hard. You can do it locally, but it's hard. It has to have leadership support. Secondly, in order for such transformation to take, and by the way, just as an example, great, Chris was, he took it to the other side of the spectrum. He did something, he called it radical transparency. We would do executive offsites with our customers in the room. So we would do, director and above offsites with 11 customers sitting at every round table in the room. And we would talk about our challenges with hiring employees, with employee turnover, with, some product roadmap issues with the customers in the room. It was very awkward at first.
Yeah.
But it was extremely, the sense of partnership for these customers coming out of the room was unbelievable. And again, it's something that needs to come from leadership, but it really transforms the way people are thinking about relationships, both internally and externally.
But God, that's so powerful. What a great example, because it really is showing your customers that you are deeply concerned about the employee experience, and that's going to benefit and shape and enhance that customer experience. So, God, that's an awesome story. I love that. That would be great if a lot of organizations, took that out and tried that in their own way. That's pretty cool. So I get that you need the example of leadership, but as I hear you talking about this, and this is probably what you're looking for when you're hiring, that you need somebody with tremendous emotional intelligence and a deep curiosity, right? To want to gather people to collaborate. I've got to be curious. I've got to be emotionally intelligent. I've got to be able to ask good questions and listen really carefully. And so how do you as a leader encourage that? Again, that doesn't just happen. You don't just cross your fingers, right? How do you encourage that and foster that on a regular basis with your team?
So I think, as leaders in organizations, there's a couple of tools that we can leverage to encourage the type of behaviors that we want to encourage. And one of them is how we measure people, because I always believe that the way that you measure people drives behaviors.
Yep.
And people sometimes don't pay a lot of attention to that, and they measure people in ways that drive the wrong behaviors. So I'm always very careful about how I measure people, because I'm trying to understand what kind of behaviors are going to be driven by the way I'm measuring people. And secondly is providing them with platforms that would make their lives easier. And I can give you a few examples, but I always believe that our role as leadership is to make our lives harder in a way that makes our employees' lives easier, right? And a lot of leadership teams make their own lives easier, but it makes their employees' lives much harder. And as an example, here at Venn, we were working. We just launched about a year ago an amazing product that we were sure was going to make a splash in the market, and it is. But on a day-to-day kind of management practice wise, we are setting goals for ourselves as a company, and it's extremely hard to set a very small number of goals. I mean, it's easier for leadership to come up with a set of 15 goals, but then it makes it very hard for employees to know on a day-to-day basis what's important and what's less important, and how do I prioritize my tasks, right? And I was pushing very hard, and my leadership team was on board to come up with just one goal. So every quarter, we come up with one organizational goal, which is extremely hard because there's so many things we want to do,
Right, right.
right? And it requires a lot of debating internally within the leadership to decide on this one goal for the next quarter. A lot of work, a lot of compromise. But then we come out and we talk to our second sort of mid-level managers, and we introduce this one goal, and it makes their lives so much easier. And we got this feedback from them over and over again about how much easier their lives are when they have one goal, and everything they do every day, they evaluate in front of this goal against this goal, and they make decisions. They make prioritization decisions. If they had even two goals or three goals, it would have been much harder. So that's kind of an example of how you make leadership's life a little bit harder to make your organization, your employees' lives easier.
Right. So it's doing the hard work that's your work as a leader. That's your job. It's not just to say, oh, our whole backlog is really important. Let's do everything. There's so many teams that I know, and they're really nice people. They're well intended, but they avoid those hard conversations of no, let's make some trade offs and let's do some prioritizing. And the feedback from their people is constantly, yeah, we don't know what's important because you say everything is important. Right? They don't do that. And so when leadership does what you do and have those hard conversations and get it down to one thing, that's truly servant leadership, because then, right, that's, I'm going to have those hard conversations and do my hard work in service of you so that you can now shape your work. And it's much easier for you to figure out, oh, I know what my work is now because I know what that one goal is.
Right. And I always say, if you have too many goals, you don't have any goals.
Yes.
Right. So that's one example. Another example, Greg, is I was talking about how you measure people. And I told you that I always tell my product managers that they're CEOs of their products. So I want to measure them on the success, on the business success of their products. And I've seen a lot of organizations measure their product managers on stuff like, how many features have you developed, or how many releases have you had, or the quality. No, I want to measure them on the bottom line because that's the kind of behavior I want to drive. I want them to think about their business. I want them to think more holistically. And that is going to drive a behavior that I'm trying to drive with my product managers. And this does not only apply to the product managers, but, as an example, the same CEO, Chris Island, he came up with this concept of offering teams. So we had this, for every product offering that we had a team that was always led by a product manager, but there was an engineering person, a support person, a sales person, a marketing person, etc. They were, working together as a team, and they own the success of this product. And, I would have them present to the entire company once every month, or, depending on the product, and talk about some of the key challenges, the business status, but also some of the key challenges. And even if the product is doing very well, there's always some red flag, right? Maybe we're not doing very well in this geography. Maybe we have some issues with support tickets. Maybe we have some issues with the product roadmap. So I always push them to highlight a few red flags and then provide us with a resolution plan for these red flags and assign an owner to each of these resolution plans. This makes sure that they're accountable to their business as a team. And when engineering is accountable for the business, and support is accountable for the business, and marketing is accountable for the business, they don't just think about their function. They think about how do they work as a team. And you talked about, me hiring people with emotional intelligence and emotional skills. I want to hire first and foremost team players. I mean, this is a team sport, and you can't win alone. So, I'm trying to find these kinds of people who can lead by example, who can orchestrate a team, but that understand that, I'm leading a team. And sometimes I had product managers tell me, I can do this better than support. I can do this better than sales. but that doesn't scale, right?
Right.
If the product manager ends up doing everything, it doesn't scale. You gotta be an orchestrator of a team, and that's sort of, you measure them by this, you give them the platform, and you encourage this kind of behavior.
Yeah. Well, and when they say something like that, that's a sign to me that that's a workaround, that they've run into a barrier and they're backing up, right? And they're looking for a workaround instead of leaning into, there's probably a hard conversation that they're avoiding, and I'll just do it myself.
One of my product managers, once he told me, no, everything's going to blow up. I mean, if I don't do the work of the SE and the salesperson, it's all going to blow up. And I was like, right now you're hiding it under the rug. It's going to blow up much worse in a couple of quarters if we don't deal with the source of the problem, right? And the source is that we need a team around this. It's not a one-man show.
That's right. The only way is through. There's no way around. So I've loved this conversation. I've learned a lot. I think the people who are listening are going to be really happy to listen in on our conversation. I always like to end my conversations with people when I'm working with an individual or a team with an expression of gratitude, because it makes us all feel better. I want to tell you how grateful I am for you for taking the time to talk with me today and share your wisdom and your experience and your stories with our listeners. I'm really, really grateful for you being here. And I want to give you the final word, whatever you want. If you want to express some gratitude, but I'll give you the final word today.
So, gratitude is also a good way to end a conversation. First of all, thanks, Greg, because I really enjoyed this many times. As I told you before, the conversation is more focused on the professional aspect of, maybe product management or tech. This gave me an opportunity to share some of my experience in leadership conversation. I think a lot of leaders are looking at, what other leaders are doing and trying to learn from them. I learned a lot from some of the really great leaders that I had throughout my career. So thanks for this platform, and hopefully we get to do this again sometime.
That would be terrific. I bet you folks will reach out and say, hey, have that Dvir guy back on. That was good. So I look forward to that. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thanks to you for listening to another episode of Ultra Leadership. If you liked today's episode, please give us a good review, and please maybe subscribe to our YouTube channel and listen to us there and tell your friends about us. So that's another edition of Ultra Leadership. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care. If you're enjoying Ultra Leadership, please take a minute and give us a review wherever you find your podcasts. And please stay in touch. Sign up for our Ultra Leadership newsletter at ultraleadership.com. Now, before you jump to your next meeting, I invite you to reflect on what you heard today. What stood out for you? What insight might you want to incorporate into your leadership practice? Until next time, remember, as a leader, you always have the power to shape the future and change lives. So go to the edge and push farther. Thanks for listening.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.